Welcome to Story Medicine. I am Joe Summerfield. For over 20 years, I've been working to better understand and support people in navigating this human experience. And I've come to believe that stories are encoded with the collective wisdom of all who have come before us, that they bring us into connection with the collective unconscious, and contain treasure waiting to be decoded. This podcast explores traditional tales through that lens. Each episode offers a story told in full, an exploration of the medicine it might carry, and practices to help you integrate that medicine. Today's story comes from Japanese folklore, the tale of Tsuru Nyōbō, the crane's wife. This tale exists in many regional variations across Japan, but I am working primarily from the version preserved in the Niigata prefecture, one of the most complete that we have from the Japanese oral tradition. In Japanese culture, the crane is sacred, a symbol of longevity, beauty, and fidelity. The story also revolves around a concept central in Japanese culture of on, which is a profound sense of debt or obligation or gratitude for kindness or favours or benefits received. But this tale shows us what happens when this honouring becomes compulsion, when we give not from our genuine gifts or capacities, but from the way that we think we must give, and when we build relationships on the foundations of deception, however beautiful the deception may appear. Let's begin. Part 1. The Story. Once, in the mountains of Japan, there lived a young man who gathered firewood to sell in the village. He was poor but kind, and he lived simply in a small house at the forest's edge. One winter morning, the snow falling thick and silent, the young man came across a crane flapping pitifully on the ground. The bird was beautiful, as white as the snow itself, and with a bright red crown, but one of its wings was pierced through by a hunter's arrow. The man knelt in the snow beside the wounded creature, and gently, speaking soft words, he removed the arrow. He cleaned the wound with water from his flask, and tore a strip from his own sleeve to bind the wing, and then he applied whatever medicine he had. When he was done, the crane struggled to its feet. It beat its wings once, twice, and then lifted up into the air. It circled the man's head 3 times, crying out, a sound both mournful and grateful, before it flew away into the white sky. The man watched it go, then he gathered his firewood and made his way home through the deepening snow. That evening, as darkness fell and the snow continued to fall thick against his windows, there came a knock at his door. When he opened it, a young woman stood there, beautiful and shivering in the cold. She wore travelling clothes, dusted with snow, and her eyes were deep and dark. "Please," she said, "I have nowhere to go. May I shelter here tonight?" The man was startled. He looked out into the darkness, the snow, the hour far too late for anybody to be travelling alone. But he was kind, so he welcomed her inside and built up the fire and offered her what little food he had. And she ate gratefully. And as he prepared her bed for her by the hearth, while he would sleep in the corner, she said something that stopped him. "I am your wife," she said simply. He stared at her. "But I am very poor. I can barely feed myself, let alone a wife. I have nothing to offer you." She smiled. Something both sad and certain in that smile. "I have a bag of rice," she said. "We will not go hungry. Please let me stay." And so, because he was lonely and she was beautiful, and because there was something in her eyes that he could not name, he agreed. The days that followed were the happiest that the man had ever known. The bag of rice that she'd brought never emptied, no matter how much they ate. She kept the house warm and clean, and in the evenings they would sit by the fire and she would tell him stories of distant places, though she never said where she had come from. Then, one night, after they had been together for some weeks, she said to him, "I would like to weave something for you. Will you build me a weaving room?" "Of course," he said, pleased to do something for her in return for all that she had given him. He built the room the next day, a small space off the main house with a sturdy loom inside, and when it was finished, she stood in the doorway and turned to him. Her face was very serious. I will weave for 7 days, she said. You must promise me one thing. No matter what you hear, no matter how curious you become, you must not look inside this room while I work. Do you understand? You must not look. He promised. Of course he promised. She went into the room and closed the door. For 7 days he heard the click-clack boom of the loom. It went on day and night, never stopping, that steady rhythm like a heartbeat. Sometimes he thought he heard other sounds too, a soft crying, a rustling like feathers. But he kept his promise. He did not look. On the 7th day, the weaving stopped. The door opened, and his wife emerged. She was pale, terribly thin, her face drawn with exhaustion. But in her hands she carried a bolt of cloth so beautiful that it took his breath away. It shimmered like moonlight on water, impossibly fine, impossibly perfect. Take this to the Lord's castle. Her voice, barely a whisper. He will pay you 1,000 ryo for it. The man was astonished. 1,000 ryo. More money than he had ever imagined. But what's it made of? He asked. You had no thread, no materials. Please, she said, and there was something in her eyes, a pleading, a warning. Just sell it. Don't ask questions. So he took the cloth to the Lord's castle. The Lord examined it and declared it the finest that he had ever seen, and he paid 1,000 ryo without hesitation. More than that, he commanded the man to bring another just like it. The man returned home, wealthy beyond his dreams. When he told his wife of the Lord's command, he saw something flicker across her face. Was it fear or sadness? But she nodded. I will weave one more, she said, but you must promise again. Do not look inside the room whilst I work. He promised, but this time there was a seed of doubt in his chest. How was she making such cloth? Where did the materials come from? And what was she hiding in there? So again she went into the room, and again the click-clack boom of the loom began, that ceaseless rhythm day and night. But this time the man's curiosity grew and grew. He told himself he needed to know. He told himself he had a right to know. He told himself it couldn't hurt just to peek, just to see how she created such beauty. And on the 5th day he could no longer bear it. He crept to the door. He put his eye to a crack in the wood, and he looked inside. And what he saw would haunt him forever. There was no woman at the loom. There was a crane, white and beautiful, but covered in red spots where feathers had been torn away. The bird was plucking feathers from its own body, one by one, and weaving them into the cloth with its beak. The loom was splattered with blood. The crane was nearly bare, its skin raw and exposed. As he watched, frozen in horror, the crane turned its head and looked directly at him. And in this moment, he saw his wife's eyes looking out of the crane's face. The weaving stopped, the door opened, and his wife stood there, gaunt and terrible, holding the second cloth. Her eyes were full of grief. I am the crane that you saved that day in the snow, she said quietly. You removed the arrow from my wing. You bound my wing with a strip torn from your own sleeve. I came to you to repay that kindness, to give you what I could, to share your life, to ease your loneliness. She handed him the cloth. But you have seen what I am. You have seen what it has cost me to weave these gifts. And now that you know, I can no longer stay. No, he said, reaching for her. Please, I'm sorry. I won't ask again. I'll never look again. Please don't go. But she was already changing. Her arms became wings. White feathers bloomed across her skin. The debt is repaid, she said. Her voice was breaking. I leave you these cloths to remember me by. Be well, live long, find happiness. And then she was a crane again, white and beautiful, the wounds on her body still visible where she had torn away her own feathers. She launched herself through the door and up, up, up into the sky. She circled the house 3 times, calling out that same mournful, grateful cry that he had heard that day in the snow. And a flock of cranes passed overhead, and she joined them, flying north, growing smaller and smaller in the distance against the winter sky. The man stood in the doorway, wealthy beyond measure, holding the cloths that she had woven from her own body. But he was alone, and the crane never returned. Part 2. The Medicine. Let's explore the medicine that this story may be offering us. Before we do that, if you know anybody who might appreciate this story or its medicine right now, then please share the episode with them. And if you're enjoying the podcast and would like to help others find it too, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Thank you. This is a story from a living Japanese tradition, and so to understand its depth we need to understand something central in Japanese culture, the concept of on, acknowledging kindness received and the duty or obligation to honor it through reciprocity. On represents both the beauty of interdependence and the weight of obligation. When somebody saves your life or shows you profound kindness, you carry on the recognition that you are held in relationship through this act and the pressure to repay it in some way. It isn't simply gratitude, it's a compelling sense that there is a debt that must be discharged. In this story, we witness what happens when that obligation becomes compulsion, when honoring kindness tips into self-destruction, and when we build intimacy on foundations of deception, however beautiful that deception may appear. Here's what the story shows us if we look closely. The crane arrives at his door as somebody she is not. She presents herself as human, without revealing her true nature. From that very first moment, the relationship is built on fraudulence. And notice, the story tells us that he sees something. He looks into the darkness, the snow, the hour far too late for anybody to be travelling alone. The improbability is obvious, yet he accepts her anyway. He doesn't ask questions. Why? Perhaps he's lonely. Perhaps she's beautiful. Perhaps because asking questions would require him to face truths that he would rather avoid. They are both participating in a deception from the beginning. She is hiding who she is, and he is choosing not to see. Think about what the crane actually has to offer. In Japanese culture, the crane embodies longevity, beauty, grace, fidelity, extraordinary gifts that would have blessed any relationship. These are her natural offerings. But she disposes of these gifts. She hides her crane nature, presenting herself as merely human. And in doing so, she doesn't just hurt herself, she prevents him from receiving the actual blessing of who she is. She pursues the way that she thinks she needs to give, instead of offering what she genuinely has. The rice bag is a nice demonstration of this. That endless rice is a sustainable gift that she can give and that they need. It costs her nothing, yet it provides everything they need to survive, and they could have been content with that. But it's not enough for her, because her giving isn't actually about love or presence, it's about discharging on. About proving her worthiness to stay, about manufacturing love through sacrifice, rather than through offering genuine presence. So she weaves. She tears feathers from her own body, she plucks herself nearly bare, and creates beauty through self-destruction or self-sacrifice. And she hides this cost from him, keeping the truth locked away in that room, and she demands that he promises not to look. This is a kind of performative love. This is love as transaction, love as proof. Not love as presence, not love as genuine offering of self. The crane's tragedy is possibly that she had everything she needed to bless the relationship, but she couldn't trust that her real self was enough. So she created a false self and destroyed her true nature in maintaining the fiction. And here's where we might look at his complicity, because this is something like a codependent dynamic. They both are avoiding truth in their own ways. After the first weaving, she emerges, pale, terribly thin, with her face drawn from exhaustion, and he does see this. He witnesses the cost. And when he asks about the materials, she responds, "Please, just sell it, don't ask questions." She explicitly asks him not to pursue the truth, and he agrees. When the Lord demands a second cloth and he tells his wife, he saw something flicker across her face. Was it fear or was it sadness? The story tells us that he notices. He notices her reaction and he knows something is wrong. Nevertheless, he doesn't protect her. He accepts her agreement to weave again, even knowing that it's costing her something terrible. Perhaps there's a part of him that wants wealth. Perhaps the Lord's command feels inescapable. Perhaps he's been so kept in the dark that he doesn't feel entitled to object. But regardless, he is complicit. He is participating in the deception by not asking hard questions, by not demanding the truth, and by not protecting her or their relationship from her compulsion. They are locked in a pattern. She controls through hiding, and he's infantilized by being kept in darkness. Both avoid the reality that their relationship is built on lies. And this is where looking becomes medicine. But this time there was a seed of doubt in his chest. How was she making such cloth? Where did the materials come from? And what was she hiding? The doubt was already there. He'd noticed the improbability of her arrival, witnessed her depletion, seen the fear flicker across her face. He knew at some level that everything was wrong. So perhaps his curiosity isn't innocent wonder. Perhaps it's the instinct for truth finally overriding his willingness to be complicit in the lie. When he looks inside the room, perhaps it's him refusing to participate in fraud any longer. Perhaps a wiser part of him knows we cannot have what's not real anyway. Better to face the truth and lose everything than maintain a beautiful lie. And what does he see? The crane, his true wife's form, covered in red spots where feathers had been torn away, plucking herself nearly bare, weaving her own body into cloth. The loom was splattered with blood. The beauty is created through brutal self-destruction. He sees what the performative love actually costs, and that revelation shatters everything. Not because he violated her privacy, but because the relationship was built on a foundation that couldn't survive contact with reality. "I am the crane that you saved," she tells him. "I came to repay that kindness. But you have seen what I am. You have seen what it cost me to weave these gifts. And now that you know, I can no longer stay." Why can't she stay? Not because he broke a promise, although that is true, but because the relationship was never real. It was built on her fraudulent reputation and his complicit ignorance. Once truth is revealed, the fiction cannot be maintained. Could it have been different? Could there have been a relationship built on truth? Could he have loved the crane as crane, appreciating her natural gifts, without demanding that she destroy herself to prove worthiness? We don't know. We will never know. The story doesn't tell us, and the story doesn't give us an opportunity to find out. But it does suggest that her compulsion was so strong, her sense of unworthiness perhaps so deep, that she couldn't risk offering her real self. When we lie, to ourselves or to others, in some sense we are attempting to control reality in order to avoid the need to adapt or to change or to grow. The crane lies about who she is to control his perception, perhaps to avoid risking rejection. And he participates in the lie, choosing the comfort that she provides. But lying creates friction with the truth, and the truth is inevitable. And so the relationship was unsustainable from the beginning. It had to fall apart because it was built on fraudulence. We can't have what's not real. Perhaps this asks us, where are we presenting a false self, convinced that our real nature may in some way not be enough? Where are we disposing of our natural gifts in pursuit of the way that we think that we need to give? And where are we manufacturing our worthiness through self-destruction or self-sacrifice? And equally, where are we accepting gifts whilst choosing not to see their cost? Where are we complicit in somebody else's self-destruction or self-abandonment because asking questions would disturb the dynamic? There is a tension in this story that's worth acknowledging. There is medicine in mystery, in wonder, in magic, in not needing to understand everything, in the same way that a magic trick might lose its power when we see how it's done. There is value in allowing some things to remain mysterious. So in some sense, he might have honoured the boundary that she set in not looking into the room. But in this case, the mystery was hiding unsustainability. The wonder was masking self-destruction. Had he not looked, it could have led to something beautiful dying, as the crane plucked herself bare. So the medicine in this story perhaps isn't so simply that we should respect mystery or that we should always seek truth. The medicine is perhaps in discernment, learning to sense the difference between mystery that serves wonder and mystery that hides harm. How do we know the difference? Perhaps by attending to the signs that the story shows us: the improbability, the exhaustion, the fear that flickers across somebody's face, the questions that we're told not to ask, the depletion we witness but don't acknowledge. Truth has a texture, and lies have a texture. If we're paying attention, and if we're willing to be honest, we can feel the difference. Even when a lie is wrapped in beauty, even when the truth threatens everything that we've built. So in the end, the crane flies away, and the man is left with wealth and loneliness. He's lost everything that mattered to him. But the fraudulent relationship had to end. The only tragedy is perhaps that it lasted as long as it did, that so much was destroyed in service of maintaining something that was never real. And the medicine perhaps lives in that honest ending, in the recognition that facing the truth, however painful, however costly, is the only path to genuine connection. That we must offer what we actually have, not what we think we need to give. And that we must see what's actually there, not what we wish were true. And perhaps, if we're willing to face this medicine, we can learn to build relationships on different foundations. Ones where our natural gifts are enough, where the truth is more precious than comfort, where we risk offering our real selves and risk seeing others truly and clearly, and in doing so, where we can live with magic and wonder, knowing that it's safe. Part 3. Integration Practices. Here are 3 practices to help you integrate this story's medicine. First practice: natural gifts versus manufactured worthiness. Over the next week, pay attention to how you give in your important relationships, with partners, with family, with friends, with colleagues, and make 2 lists. List 1. What are my natural gifts? What do I actually have to offer when I'm being genuinely myself? It might be things like presence or humour, insight or steadiness, creativity, practical help, listening, whatever feels true and sustainable for you. And list 2. What am I manufacturing to prove my worthiness? What am I giving that depletes me, that comes from, I must do this to be acceptable, rather than, this is what I have to offer? Be honest with yourself. Where are you plucking your own feathers? Where are you disposing of your natural gifts in pursuit of the way that you think you need to give? And where are you keeping other people in the dark? The practice isn't necessarily to stop all depleting giving immediately. Sometimes we do consciously choose sacrifice, and that is for a higher calling of some kind, and that is of great value. but the practice is to see the pattern clearly, to acknowledge it, and to ask yourself, am I giving from genuine abundance and consent, or from compulsion? Second practice. Noticing what you choose not to see. Think about a relationship. It could be an intimate relationship, a familial relationship, or professional, where some part of you suspects that something isn't quite right. What are the signs that you're choosing not to examine too closely? What improbabilities are you accepting without question? What exhaustion are you witnessing but not acknowledging? What questions are you being required, directly or indirectly, not to pursue? Write these down as specifically as possible, not in judgment, but in honest recognition. And then ask yourself, what am I protecting by not looking? What comfort, what benefit, or what beautiful fiction might I lose if I face what's actually there? This isn't about immediately confronting or changing anything, and the course of action, in any case, is not obvious. It's about ending the complicity with our own ignorance. It's about acknowledging, I'm choosing not to see this. I have reasons, but I am choosing. Consciousness is the beginning of change. Once you see clearly that you're participating in a fiction, you can't unknow that. And knowing, however uncomfortable, is medicine. Third practice. Offering your real self. Choose one relationship where you have been presenting a curated version of yourself, where you're hiding parts of who you are, managing how you're perceived, performing in order to be acceptable. This week, take one small risk toward authenticity. Not a dramatic revelation, but a genuine offering of something real that you've chosen to keep hidden. For example, share an actual need instead of pretending that you're fine. Express a genuine preference instead of accommodating. Reveal a struggle instead of projecting competence. Or show exhaustion instead of maintaining the performance. And notice what happens. Does the relationship deepen or does it fracture? Do they see you more clearly or do they pull away? Can intimacy survive contact with authenticity? The crane couldn't risk this. Perhaps she was convinced that her real nature would be rejected, so she created a false self and destroyed herself in maintaining that fiction. So this practice asks, what if your real self is enough? What if your natural gifts, longevity, beauty, grace, whatever form they take for you, are actually what's needed, not the manufactured aspects that you're depleting yourself in order to provide? You might discover that being seen clearly creates possibility for genuine connection that performance never could. The medicine doesn't come from understanding these patterns intellectually. It comes from the practices, from allowing transformation to happen on a daily basis, and in your honest acknowledgement of where you are and your willingness to face what you've been avoiding. Nobody can have what's not real anyway, but we can choose to offer what's genuine and risk being met there, because that's where real intimacy becomes possible. The wisdom in these old stories waits patiently. I hope this one's found you where you need it. Thank you for listening to Story Medicine. I am Joe Summerfield. Until next time.